Hello, everyone. Thanks for watching. My name is Rachel Brown, and I'm the ISEP Student Services Supervisor for Pre-Departure Processes. Today, we want to share how you, as a U.S. student, can prepare yourself for cultural differences that you may face in your host country in our current political climate. We encourage you to reference this video again in the future if you ever have challenges talking about who you are or what you value while you are on your ISEP program. So first, it's important to understand that the perspective of American identity differs widely across the world. In this context, when we say American, we are referring to citizens from the United States specifically. So in the US, you may be considered Italian or German or Korean American, but abroad, you may just be identified as American. And this is not uncommon in countries outside of the US. With this as well, certain identities of yours, both visible and invisible, may become more or less salient in your host country. So when you arrive to your host country, you should think about how this is going to impact you when you meet others for the first time, as it's possible that they may not know much or anything about an identity that you present based on the social categories that they grew up being exposed to. If you have to correct or clarify something, remember to give the person grace. And also remember that what they know isn't weird or wrong. It's just something different that you're experiencing for the first time. In addition, US politics may be heavily followed by citizens in your host country and can often be the center of casual discussions. You may be asked as an American to explain your personal views or experiences with US politics or to debate your political beliefs suddenly. So before arrival, we do recommend that you do your research. You should think about understanding the general relationship between the US and your host country. So for example, it's a good idea to learn the name of the leader of your host country, as this is a good way to build bridges of understanding with others that you meet. You should also know the primary news outlet of your host country and try to stay informed on popular topics of discussion. But at the same time, you should recognize that biases exist in news outlets just as it does here in the US. But above all, you should also remind yourself that there's no expectation for you to be an expert. So don't feel pressured to have all the answers if someone asks you a question that you aren't sure of. It's completely fine to say, I'm not sure, I'd have to look into that further. Certain cultures may welcome open conversations about politics in both private and public settings. If you are ever in a difficult conversation with someone, remember our tips from us here at ISEP. First, you should acknowledge and understand criticism. You are encouraged to listen openly to criticisms of US policies or culture without taking it personally. Remember that political critiques are often aimed at governments or historical actions. It's not always directed at specific individuals. Being informed about recent US foreign policy and historical context, like we mentioned before, can help you better understand others' perspectives. You should also consider separating identity from politics. You represent yourself first, and your views may not align with those of your government or the stereotypes that you might be confronted with. And this is the same for the people that you meet in your host country. The US is not a monolith, and your host country is not a monolith. There's a wide diversity of opinion and experiences represented aside from your own and what's in the news, as well as the experiences represented by the people that you meet and what's in their news in your host country. You should also think about staying curious rather than being defensive when you're in conversations with people. Demonstrate your own values through active listening and personal leadership, and always ask yourself the question, what kind of impression do I want to leave in this interaction? You should think about modeling curiosity in your language. So, saying things such as, that's interesting. Can you tell me more about why you feel that way? Remember that defensiveness can shut down dialogue, but curiosity is going to be what keeps it going and what helps build mutual respect between parties. We also recommend that you practice empathy and cultural humility. Empathy is key. Trying to see the world from someone else's point of view is one of the most important things that you can do during a cultural exchange. Cultural humility means being open to learning and recognizing your own cultural positionality and understanding how it might interact with your host culture. You should also think about using your experiences as a bridge. So feel free to share personal stories, experiences, or challenges that you faced, not just your opinions about certain topics. Your personal narrative can help humanize political or cultural debates that you may have. And then we recommend that you be a positive cultural ambassador while you're on your ISEP program and representing your host country and culture. While you aren't expected to defend every action of the US, you can model openness, respect, and critical thinking. Positive interactions can help challenge stereotypes others may have about Americans. While open and spirited conversations about politics may occur during your time abroad, we encourage you to consider the difference between being in an uncomfortable situation and an unsafe one. It should hopefully be very rare that you encounter an unsafe situation abroad as long as you are practicing good safety protocols. Consider reflecting on your own level of comfort regarding conversations about potentially charged topics and determining how you are going to establish your own limits for certain topics that you may feel passionate about. Not every comment requires a debate. It's okay to set boundaries if a conversation becomes aggressive or unsafe. You should think about some strategies you could use to gracefully exit a difficult conversation as well. For example, you can say, I appreciate your perspective, but I think we'll just have to agree to disagree here. And if a conversation shifts from being uncomfortable to making you feel unsafe, you should feel free to excuse yourself and depart the situation as calmly as possible. Should you feel unsafe in any given situation, remember that you have resources to support you during your ISEP program. First, you have your ISEP health and safety resources. You can find this information in your dashboard, and then you'll find information for the emergency contacts that are local to your host country. You also have your on-site ISEP coordinator. They're very knowledgeable on your host country, and they've often worked with incoming students in the past. So don't be afraid to lean on them and ask them what their advice is to overcome cultural barriers. Then you have your ISEP Student Services Officer. As you know, you can always reach out to us to have a Zoom meeting or a phone call to chat about any worries that you have pre-arrival or to talk through any issues that you may face while you're abroad. Thank you, and I hope you have a safe time on your upcoming ISEP program.